Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, fellow Nigerians particularly, and the world over. This afternoon, I'd like to appreciate everyone who is on this platform or who is coming to join me on this broadcast. And I'd like to take time to commiserate with the families of Nigerians who have lost their lives in the last 24 hours, or thereabouts, and those who have been injured and hospitalized because of the situation or crisis that we have in our country at a time like this. Now, this is supposed to be an open forum, a place where we can interact and share ideas one with another. And therefore, I would just like to see on the scroll bar, I would encourage that if you are following and you want to be invited to come on live on this show and to express your views and opinions, just send in your email address and I'll make effort to send the link to you and invite you to join me even as I raise these discussions. Now, it is no longer news that Nigeria is in a crisis situation. I'm careful to the reality has brought us into a more or less a crisis situation. And of course, almost immediately, that unit of the police was ended. But for whatever reason, a new unit was almost immediately initiated, and that sparked off more cries and agitations over police brutality and the way that police have been handling people, particularly in Nigeria, and more especially in Lagos State of Nigeria. Now, as that situation unfolded, it metamorphosed from one thing onto another, from one situation to the other, to the point where yesterday, reports reaching us was that there was an attack by soldiers on some innocent Nigerians protesting over the end of SARS or protesting and calling for the end of police brutality. How we arrived at that situation, I cannot tell. How we have come to a place where, regardless of what is said, regardless of who says it, we no longer tend to hear each other. We no longer tend to want to listen to each other even as we speak. Now, that's a sorry situation. It's a painful and sad one. And regardless of what side of the divide you find yourself in, I think as Nigerians, we must feel pain. We must have a deeper reflection of the events that are unfolding even as we go along. Now, again, Nigeria, like many other nations, is sick. Nigeria is sick because there are systems that have collapsed over years. Governments have come, governments have gone, and in some systems there have been no improvement whatsoever. Nigeria is sick because those out of government always think that they are right and correct until they get into government and they begin to behave exactly like those who were in government. And that tells me that We're sick because, not because we do not have governments, but because we lack even the sense of what leadership is. We're sick because we've lost vision, we've lost direction, we've lost focus on how to build, develop, and strengthen ourselves as a nation. And in fact, I dare say this, that Nigeria is a collection of several nations, therefore it is nearly impossible to call ourselves a nation. We're a land of a collection of peoples, over 350 ethnic groups, several religious groups that have refused to unite one with another, and we have continued to call ourselves a nation, continue to struggle to move on towards nationhood. Well, I do recognize something, that all these are processes towards developing into a nation. But I also recognize that unless there is unity, unless there is agreement, unless there is particularly agreement in our direction of purpose, we will hardly ever attain that status. I know that almost for certain. And I think that we ought to recognize and realize that situation. All right? So, like I said, I believe strongly that we have need for help, and there is a need for every one of us to sit and to look at Nigeria holistically. Now, let me point this out, that in a crisis situation, nobody wins. Nobody. Whether you succeed in killing everybody and you remain alone, you are still not a winner. And whether you succeed in disarming your aggressors, you succeed in trampling on them, you succeed in defeating them, you are still not a winner. And I'll take you through history to see why I know and understand that in a crisis situation, nobody wins. What you cannot attain in a peaceful circumstance, in a peaceful situation, you can never achieve it during crisis. It is impossible to achieve. Go around West Africa and see nations like Liberia, Sierra Leone, that had their own fair share of crisis just within the last 20 years. You will notice that they never made any progress, never made any development until the wars ended in those nations. And even after the wars, they have continued to struggle to stabilize. Why? Because crisis never brings about progress, never. And I'm emphatic about that word. The Arab Spring is less than 10 years old. Before those nations went into what they call demonstrations, riots, and whatever, the nations even seemed more stabilized than what they became after the crisis. And of course, just like we had the protests in Nigeria, there were claims then that the Arab Spring sprang up spontaneously, there were no leaders, and so on and so forth, one thing or the other. What the crisis simply did was to, change one set of political leadership for another set, but it didn't improve the nation. Those nations, again, I dare you, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, check them out. Syria, the worst of it, never benefited from the crisis. Never. Unfortunately, it would seem that Nigeria has tended to reward those who organize crisis. Nigeria has tended to do so. And again, historically, go back to the history of Nigeria. There was a time that we had a civil war. And the southeastern states, decided they wanted to form a Biafran nation and to secede from Nigeria. Of course, there was a war with millions of lives lost. The pains of those wars remain in the heart of Southeasterners as far as Nigeria is concerned. Now, besides that, just to show you how we reward crisis, or we reward those who orchestrate crisis. 8 years after that civil war, a Southeasterner became the vice president of Nigeria. Of course, that was in an attempt to compensate them for the millions of lives that had been wasted by a needless crisis that sprang up. And I said needless. Needless because we haven't moved further away from where we were in the 60s, in 1967. We haven't moved further away from that place. And if you doubt that Nigeria promotes or rewards those who are involved in crisis, in 1998, 97, 98, the southwestern states of Nigeria broke up in crisis. We had Nadeco, we had OPC blowing bombs everywhere. And in order to compensate that region, they were also giving the president of Nigeria. And for 8 years, that man sat on the throne of Nigeria and didn't even change the constitution, didn't alter anything about Nigeria. And this is 20 years after. We're still where we were when that man was given the presidency to be compensated. Or at least as it seemed. Again, during the reign of President Obasanjo, Niger Delta boys sprang up with their own crisis. They blew up oil wells, they blew up places, they kidnapped people, they killed people, particularly foreigners. And to be able to quench their crisis, or to be able to let off steam, Goodluck Jonathan was taken as the vice president of Nigeria, and eventually he became the president of Nigeria. Somehow, we have always rewarded crisis. Right now, the struggle is between the Northwest and the Northeast. Boko Haram has refused people to rest. But I can say this categorically, going by the history that I've just unfolded. If we find a Northeastern president for Nigeria, almost immediately and naturally, that crisis will die down. But how long can we continue in that regard? How long as a nation, as a people, can we take our lives to that extent? How long? It is sad. It is unthinkable. And I do not think that there is any nation that has ever grown through crisis. There was a time that Cuba had our own fair share of crisis. A dictator in the name of Fidel Castro, who pretended to be for the people, came out and swept a political class. Eventually, he became head of state of that nation. How far has Cuba grown? How well has Cuba stood amongst nations? And again, we can point out several nations that attempted to change one political head to the other through crisis, and eventually nothing good came out of the crisis. And even in this situation, all right, whether you are pro-EndSARS or against EndSARS, crisis will never produce any meaningful results. Crisis will never, just as it has never in any instance produced any meaningful results. I hear Nigerians suggest that we slaughter political leaders. Anyone who has ever held any political office in this nation, that we slaughter them. Well, let me remind us, Ghana did it. How far is Ghana from Nigeria? How far? Crisis never promotes progress. Never. Absolutely never promotes progress. There is nowhere in the world that crisis has promoted progress. Now, if this be the case, what should we be doing? What should we be doing as a people? What are the lessons that we can learn from the situation that has overwhelmed us? And you see, somehow everyone talks about peace, yet not everyone wants to maintain or promote peace. In the course of the NSAS protest, okay, suddenly other youths from places unknown began to attack the NSAS protesters. And let me point this clearly. I do not support all that the protesters have done. I do not. But worse still, I do not support those who have risen up against the protesters and killing innocent Nigerians. There is nothing worse off than killing an innocent human being, a human being that you did not create. There is nothing worse off than that. Well, we've come to that situation where we're having to resolve crisis again. And let me say this by way of encouragement. This is not the first time that Nigeria has gone into a crisis. This is not the first time, and perhaps it will not be the last. But you see, from every crisis situation, we can learn and make progress. Even though the crisis does not bring progress, but the things we can learn from the crisis can enable us make progress as we move along. I am a man of faith. I believe with the whole of my life, with the whole of my soul, with the whole of my spirit, the person of Jesus Christ. I believe in him entirely and all that he teaches. And I know one thing. He teaches that I must love my neighbor just as I love myself. And I dare to say that in loving my neighbor, just as I love myself, I must consider my neighbor's interest as much as I consider my own interest. In fact, like he showed by his life, the interests of others were always higher than his own interest, even though he was the leader of all men. So friends, having come to a crossroad, and of course we're on a crossroad. Now, having come to a crossroad, what do we do? How do leaders behave at times like this? How do leaders respond to crises like this? Or before the crisis, how do leaders see themselves? And how should leaders see themselves? And by the way, when I say leaders, I'm talking to everyone across board. I'm not referring to political leaders, because there are so many who occupy leadership offices that do not even have the slightest hint about what leadership is or should be. And I'm talking to everyone across board. At times like this, we must learn to value people. That's what Jesus teaches. We must learn to value people. Jesus valued everyone that came across him. What does it mean to value people? It means to love people unconditionally. It means to accept people's perspective and view, even if they differ with ours. You must learn to believe in people. You must learn to place high value on the life of every human being. Leaders value people. Everyone who has taken a stone, taken a stick, a knife, a gun to end the life of another person does not value people. He or she does not value people. Anyone who in protest has blocked the road for other road users does not value people. What they do is they value their interests higher and greater and better than the interest of others. In the course of this crisis, or in the course of this protest, there were protesters who blocked the roads and stopped others from carrying out their legitimate businesses. In the course of this, there were bloodthirsty military men who took guns to shoot down innocent citizens of Nigeria. These people do not value people. And if you find yourself in any of those class of people, you do not value people. And unless your mentality changes, unless you begin to see things the way that other people see things, even if you do not agree with them, then you will not be considered a leader. You cannot consider yourself a leader. You cannot devalue people. You cannot devalue other people's interests and then place yourself wanting to be called or considered a leader. Just early this morning, I was going through, now for a very long time, I've stopped listening to news, whether CNN, BBC, NTA, Silverbird, whatever, because I realized that news has a way of dampening people's spirit, especially in the morning. But today, I took it as a matter of duty and responsibility to flip through several television stations, to look at their news, to listen to the news, and to listen to the reports that are made about Nigerians or about Nigeria and the situation at hand. Now, I noticed that virtually everyone who reported the news removed the individuals, removed human beings, and concentrated on things that were insignificant as far as the life of humans were concerned. Everyone who died, nobody dared to call them by name. We just simply considered them as statistics. What a sad situation. I have watched several videos, and in one appalling video, I saw where a human being was burnt alive in the name of protest, in the name of anti-protest. That is sickening. That is unthinkable. We must learn to value people. We must learn to place value on the lives of people. Every human being matters because every human being was created in the image and in the likeness of God. For years, scientists have been attempting to replicate the making of human beings. And I can say to you categorically, until the world ends, no human being can create another human being. Until the world ends. The human species is an exceptional species. Exceptional. Regardless of who the person is, regardless of how foolish you think the person is, regardless of how worthless you think the person is, there is a creator in heaven that values every human being. And my challenge to us as humans is that we must learn to value humans. There have been crises across the globe. People slaughtering humans. As leaders, we must learn to value humans. The second point is that we must learn to put behind us selfish values and put before us good, solid values. It was Jesus who taught that we must treat others just the way that we want them to treat us. For those who raised arms against others, let me say this also. Jesus also taught that he who lives by the sword will surely die by the sword. Selfish values has caused that we no longer place good values before us. For the protesters, their cry, their claim was that police brutality was unbearable. And they needed a better Nigeria. They needed a better police. Of course, pronouncements were made. Why they stretched the protest so far, I do not know. But then that also does not justify the fact that others came against them. People who do not have good values. Remember, it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Just a few months ago, we were raising our fists and shouting that Black Lives Matter. Why? Because of the police brutality in the United States of America against black folks. Sadly, the largest black nation in the world also has raised arms against its own citizens. Why? Because selfish values have overridden our sense of reasoning. Selfish values have overridden our sense of reason. We must put behind us selfish values. What started like a peaceful protest ended up with sides taking arms against each other. And I say this with no fear, because both sides are guilty of the situation that is unfolding in Nigeria. Just a while ago, like I said, I was flipping through several TV stations. I'm an ardent fan, because of my wife, of the TVC programs Your View. And the ladies on Your View this morning were speaking out against the brutality on the protesters at Lekki in Lagos. And while they were doing that, in the midst of the program, I do not know them because they were not shown, but some persons attacked the TV station, stopped the program, and forced virtually everyone out of the TV station. And the next report we heard was that people were burning down the TV station. Excuse me, what are your values? Obviously, those are selfish values. Selfish values. You cannot claim to be a leader if you have selfish values. You cannot be a leader if you treat people the way that you don't expect to be treated. That's falsehood. You cannot be a leader, or at least you're not exhibiting your leadership values when you exhibit selfish values. Last week during this broadcast, or just immediately after the broadcast, I had a shout outside my compound. And I rushed out to the next compound to find out what the situation was. and a young man was fighting an elderly person. Why? Because the elderly person was insisting on being paid the right price for sand, building sand, sharp sand delivered to the building site. The young man was insisting to claim that a higher price needed to be paid by the bosses so that he will make his own cut and pay the old man what he thought was his own value. But the old man was insisting, no, I delivered 2 tippers of sharp sand, and I want those 2 tippers to be paid. I do not want to be paid for 3 tippers. And the young man insisted that the old man must connive with him to claim to his bosses that 3 tippers of sharp sand were delivered. What a selfish value. And I had cause to talk to the young man because he had placed selfishness ahead of him. Every good leader puts behind him every selfish value. Every true leader puts before him good and solid values, values that will stand the test of time. Values that will improve the life of people around you, around him. Every good leader pursues good value. The third thing that we've got to put in place at the moment is that we must value people enough to listen to them and to hear their perspectives about life. Like I said from the onset, I didn't align entirely with those Protestants. No, I didn't align with them. But I allowed my platform to be used by the protesters to express themselves. Why? Because I have learned to listen to people, even if their views do not agree with mine. That's how people make progress. That's how people advance. People who make progress and advance in life, they respect the thoughts of other people. Unfortunately, on both sides, again, in this divide, we held to our grounds, we became unreasonable, we refused to listen to people. On my secondary school platform on WhatsApp, everyone who pointed out that he or she didn't like the protest was basically attacked by others within the same group. And everyone who claimed to like the protest was also attacked by the others on that same platform. Why? How have we so devalued ourselves that we've come to the point where we do not listen to each other's debate and arguments? And this culture started about 10 years ago in this country, as far as I know, where people have a view. And by the way, I'm married, and I've been so for 17 years. By March next year, it will be 18. My wife and I do not see everything the same way. It is impossible for 2 people to agree on every topic under the sun. It is impossible. The earlier we know this, the better it is for us. We have come to the point where we no longer want to listen to people and their perspective. In Nigeria, Christians have deafened their ears from listening to what Muslims are saying. Muslims have also deafened their ears from listening to what Christians are saying. How then do you make progress as a people? How then do you make progress? When a suggestion is made by any person about how this nation should advance, the first thing we look at is not the person's argument, is not the person's perspective, is the person's background. Where is he from? Where is she from? Who was her parents or who were her parents? Those are the mundane things that we have capitalized on. As a people, we will never make progress unless we learn to listen to each other. Whether you are for the protest or against the protest, you must learn to listen to others. Are those who protesting, are those who have spent their time protesting wrong? No. They make sense. They pointed out valuable points that if we hold on to, can advance this nation. Those who kicked against the protest, were they wrong? No. They also advanced and canvassed some reasonable points. Unfortunately, none of us dared to listen to each other. Both sides were more concerned about their own position, about their own point, about their own interest, and they refused basically to listen to others. When you advance a point in a developed society, listen to your point first and foremost. And when you attack someone, attack his points, attack his position, not his person. I wish that those who were looking at people at Lekki had brought up strong. I wish that it was about stronger arguments and debates, not about shooting at one another. We must know as Nigerians that there is more that unites us than there is that separates us as a people. And if you doubt, touch your skin and touch the other man's skin, you will discover that they basically have the same texture. You will note that regardless of your ethnic group, you need food to survive. You need water to survive. Regardless of your identity, regardless of your point of view, human being, we cannot afford to stop listening to one another. Otherwise, we will never make progress. Never. And in this country, we've seen all sorts of crises that have not advanced us. In Kaduna State, it is usually Northern Kaduna versus Southern Kaduna. The various ethnic groups in Southern Kaduna versus the various ethnic groups in Northern Kaduna, Christians versus Muslims. Is Kaduna State any better than any other state in Nigeria? No, not at all. Lagos has a large economy, but the world describes it as being part and parcel of Nigeria, and they cannot run away from it. They cannot run away from it. Friends, there are more that should unite us in this nation than the things that separate us. Every part of the fair share deal on leadership, every part of this nation. Yes, every part of this nation has failed and has failed woefully. And if you doubt me, go to your village right now and find out if your village is more developed than any village anywhere else in the country. Basic amenities are lacking everywhere in this country. Those are the things that should bring us together to try to change, to try to to bring advancement and development to us as a people. Those are not the things that should separate us. Those are the things that should bring us closer. The next and the last point that I'll leave is that at a time like this, we've got to focus on reflections rather than reactions. Reflections rather than reactions. Again, today, as I was watching the news, Arise TV decided to go to the places where there were crises in Lagos. And Arise TV was innocently, its reporter was innocently asking questions, interviewing people. And you know what? Someone from nowhere came and turned down their camera. Arise TV was trying to challenge people to reflect. Of course, obviously, Arise TV was not on the side of the police or soldiers and was not on the side of the people. It was on the side of those who wanted progress. Those who wanted to have news report to be able to reflect on the issues. And someone, I do not want to say what I think about the person, but simply marched up to them and turned down their cameras and insisted that the reporters must leave that vicinity. Why? We keep forgetting that our rights end where the rights of the other person begins. This is the time for reflection. Of course, there are fears right now. I have my child in school, and I'm hoping that immediately after this broadcast, I'll have to go and bring her back from school. The other daughter is in her workplace. I'm hoping that after this, I'll call her also to return home. The FCT is calm and safe, but you never can tell the things that will break out in situations like this. Of course, there are fears, but we must also learn to put our fears behind us and to reflect on the way forward as far as this situation is concerned. We must learn to ask what are the things that we've learned through this situation and crisis, and what are the things that we can put forward to be able to advance ourselves as a people. Now, like I said earlier on, nobody wins in a crisis situation. Nobody. Nobody makes progress in a crisis situation. And if you doubt me, ask the Syrians. Syrians who followed the Arab Spring thought it would be easy for them. But today, almost 10 years after, they are in a civil war with basic amenities being damaged and destroyed by the day. With nations, superpowers, imposing their interest over the Syrian people. Nobody values the Syrian people. Everyone fights for his or her interest. It is shameful. It is sad. As leaders, we must learn to value people. We must learn to have good values. We must learn to listen to people and their perspectives, even if we do not agree with their thinking. We must learn to reflect. The reason why we hardly make progress is that we hardly reflect over situations. And I'll say this, 2-3 weeks after this crisis, you would see, we would forget that we ever had the crisis. Next year, we will not even celebrate the fact that we had this crisis and overcame the crisis and that we learned certain things. No, we will not remember. We'll forget about it and move on. The 9/11 crisis took place over 20 years ago in the United States of America. But every year, America remembers that crisis, celebrates the crisis, and comes out with a renewed effort and vow to say this will never happen again in our land. That's how you make progress. We've had a civil war. We've had several battles in this nation. We never remember the situation. We just keep marching and entering from one crisis to the other. Even crises that we could avoid, we get into them because we have not learned from history how to avoid such crisis situations. Friends, we must begin to exhibit leadership qualities. And remember, I teach in agreement with a foremost teacher who says leadership is influence. And the dictionary describes influence as the ability to change someone's mentality, change someone's way of behavior. And every one of us has the capacity to change first our habits and our behaviors, and to change the habits and behavior of everyone around us for good. I would end at this point. Thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.